Hey guys, today we're going to be working on how to pass an Excel technical interview exam, alright? So there's two types of exams that you usually have to face when you're trying to get a job when it comes to Excel. The first one is the Microsoft type exam, which is sort of like the certification. They ask you a bunch of random disconnected questions about what does this feature do this, do that, write a VLOOKUP that does something, whatever, alright? However, the second type of exam is a case study exam, and this is the type of exam that we're going to be working with, because this is the one that's difficult to do. The first type, you can just read the manual, memorize a bunch of functions, and you don't have to reason anything that you're doing. But this second type, doesn't matter that it's only asking us for low-level Excel functions, you have to know what it is that you're doing, and that is what makes it so difficult. A lot of my students, when I place this exam in front of them, they don't make it, right? They don't make it, even though they already know every single one of these tools. We're going to be learning about pivot tables, we're going to be learning about charts, we're going to be learning about subtraction and percentages. Notice that none of these four are high-level Excel concepts. However, once they're applied here within the context of an hiring analysis, then yeah, they're going to get pretty rough. Guys, these kinds of technical exams, they're proliferating across all companies because they've sort of figured out that the Microsoft certification doesn't work really well for filtering out candidates. Why? Again, because they can sort of memorize everything and you can ace the exam without actually knowing what it is that you're doing. For this particular exam, it's based off of major supplier for General Motors and Ford, and they're using it for a human resources position in a big auto parts warehouse. I mean, it's really big auto parts warehouse. So it's going to be really important for us to understand the context of the exam and know when these tools are going to be applied. Let's get started. All right, guys, let's walk through a file that this company is using for its own technical interview. The file consists on actually just two tabs, indications and database. And this green one over here is an edition of my own where I explain pretty much step by step what is it that we're going to do. Now, the first part is pretty bare bones. This is pretty much how it was handed to the candidate. And it has here like a small instruction and then exactly what it is that you're supposed to be calculating. And the second tab, well, this is the meat of the problem. This is where we have the entire database that we're supposed to be using. All right, guys, so this is this is where we're going to be doing our analysis of what it says here. Now, we don't have much in the way of context. It only says that in the following spreadsheet, you'll find a fictional database with personal hires from a certain time period. With this information and using your Excel knowledge, I need you to generate a dashboard that shows me the following. And we're being asked for 8 different indicators. How many people were hired, what position they're in. That's it. All right, guys. Now, we don't know what kind of presentation they want or how they want it, so it's up to us to figure out how it's going to work. Now, in my personal opinion, these kinds of technical interviews are superior, at least when it comes to selecting people, to just relying on the Microsoft certification or Microsoft style exams, because in those exams, they just ask you to do random tasks, isolated tasks in Excel. And in this particular kind of exam, they're going to make you think, all right? We're going to be using some pretty low-level Excel tools, no complicated formulas, just pivot tables, but we're going to have to do a lot of reasoning. All right, guys? So the first thing that I want to figure out is let's go to the database and let's make it workable, all right? Now, I'm pretty sure we're going to find a bunch of mistakes right here, and we're going to figure out those mistakes on the go. But right now, I just want to begin by converting my database to an Excel table. Now, there's always a good first step in order for you to make it, in order for you to actually make it happen, all right? Because once you get an Excel table, you can work pretty easily with pivot tables, formulas, or anything else. So always make sure that your database is converted to an Excel table. Now, how would I go about doing that? If you noticed, you just heard me click on the keyboard in order to do that. I just press Control T, and it converts it to an Excel table. An alternative would be to go over here to the Insert tab and click Insert Table and press OK. There we go. All right, guys. So, however you choose to do it, once it's converted to a table, you'll know it because you get this. You get this display of blue and white colors, all right? Most importantly, this design tab right up here opens up for you, and you can move over to table name and assign the name, whichever name you want for this table, all right? You don't have to stick with table 1 or table 2. I'm going to call it something creative and imaginative, say data, for example, all right? So that's it for my creativity right now, and we're good to go. All right, guys. Now, with that said and done, let's analyze the information we have. We don't have much in the way of context. As we said, it's just a fictional database with personal hires. That's it. All right, so I'm figuring out that this is the last name of whomever was hired, the department, including some blanks into which they were assigned, the activity, only 3 possible activities they could be assigned to, plus blanks. So again, we have issues there. The hiring date, this one is pretty much self-explanatory. The assignment date, all right. So we have a comment right here, and it says that this is when the person actually comes into a plant. So hiring date, I'm given to understand, is when the person signs a contract, and this is when they actually start the job, all right? And we have dates, but we also have people that left during training or that were assigned. It says here San Luis Potosí, and the plant was actually placed in Guanajuato. So whomever says San Luis Potosí, I'm going to assume that they were assigned to another plant, all right? And then the blanks. So that means they weren't signed or the information is just empty. Liberation date. It says here when the person changes from pink to orange vest. So that pretty much means that the training is finished. All right. So we have here people that were not liberated or blanks, plus a bunch of people from 2017. And then the exit date. Those that actually left the company, either because they left during training or were not liberated, then they're going to show up here in as the exit date. At least that is as much as I can surmise from the data that is given to me. Now, guys, this is where I usually start telling off my students, and they usually hate me for it because I always tell them, look at data and analyze and think what it is that you're supposed to do. The objective of these technical interviews is not to weed out who knows and who doesn't know Excel. That's supposed to be a given. It's who can actually think with Excel, all right? Who can actually solve critical thinking problems with Excel. So guys, if you think that just by taking a simple Excel course where you learn to click here and do this and do that, and you're not going to be thinking in it, you're going to be able to actually work, that's not the case. You actually need to think about what it is that you're doing. All right? Case in point. The first thing that we're going to be asked for is how many people were hired. All right? How many people were hired? Well, there's several ways to go about it. Now, the first one would be something like really, really simple, really static, which would be just figuring out, say, for example, that each one of these lines, they're a hire. All right? Each one of these lines represents a single hire. So I just gonna count everything, 434 lines, minus the title. That means we have 433 hires, all right? Now, I could just type in here 433, and that would be that. The answer, while technically correct, is not conducive to impressing my interviewers, all right? This isn't going to help you during a technical interview because there are far better ways to do it. Notice here that it says, I need you to generate the dashboard that shows me the following. All right, so we need to generate the dashboard that shows this 143 in an attractive way. And I would really like for the 433 to be dynamic. Why? Because I'm thinking about the future. If somebody comes in and adds more new hires, say data for next month, data for the next quarter, data for the next trimester, then I want this number to update. All right, guys? However, as I said before in the intro video, we're not going to be using high-level Excel. We're just going to be doing pivot tables for everything. So what I'm going to do is add a new worksheet. I'm adding a new worksheet here, and it's right now called Sheet 1. I'm going to rename it Analysis. All right. So with that called Analysis, I'm going to go over here to Insert. I'm going to go over to... I don't need to insert anything. Just type in the title. Number of hires. All right. And I'm going to insert a pivot table. Notice how I clicked Insert Pivot Table, and I get this little square over here. So it's going to ask me from where is data coming from. All right, where is the data coming from? Well, the data is coming from this database over here, where if you remember, I called the table data. All right, so I literally just have to type in data, and voila, there we go. So I chose pivot tables as the tool for doing the counting. Some of you that actually know Excel would say, why wouldn't you use a count if? Well, That is because the dashboard that I'm going to do at the very end, it's dependent on pivot tables, all right? And I always tell my students, usually do pivot tables, avoid doing messy formulas. There's a host of reasons for that. All right, guys, how would I know how many people were hired? Well, there's like several ways to do it with a pivot table. Again, remember that the calculation that we made by hand consisted in pretty much just doing counting, all right? Counting how many lines are there. So I'm going to do the exact same thing in the pivot table. I'm going to grab the last name and drag it down here to values, and boom, I have number of hires. All right, guys. Now, notice that this was really simple. I just grabbed last name and drag it down there to values. But the part that is going to be really hard for most of you guys is actually figuring that out. All right. Whenever I come into my classroom and it's like the first few sessions and I ask my students to do this kind of stuff, they struggle a lot. I mean, some of them can't even figure it out, even though they know pivot tables down cold, all right? Because they know that they exist and they can sort of do it if you are telling them to move the last name into a values, if that's the instruction. But if you are asking them to count something, well, that's where thinking comes in, guys, all right? Remember, it's really important that you reason what it is that you're supposed to be doing. All right, now, this is more for me than anything else. I want to make this like a big fat title in order to make it visible. And there we go, number of hires. Okay, what position they're in. This isn't something that I can do just by simply counting, all right? The first thing that I have to figure out is what do they mean by position? This is probably a mistake. I mean, this isn't correct on the part of whoever designed this technical interview, because I'm not clear on whether the position is the department or the activity. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that the position is the activity, whether he's a forklift operator, logistical operator, or in package routing, all right? Why do I assume that? Because, well, it's cheating, but I already talked to the human resources department that created this, this exam, and yeah, they meant activity by position, all right? In a real world scenario, make sure that you can actually ask your interviewer. All right, guys, so what position are the hires in? Let me copy the format from this number of hires down here, and let's get started. All right, insert, pivot table, data. I'm going to grab my last name and drag down here to values, all right? I get the same 433, but I need to figure out what position the hires are in. So I'm going to grab activity and drag it down here to rows. And I am going to see that I get a bunch of stuff here, all right? Remember when I told you that the database was going to have a bunch of mistakes? Well, here they are showing up. I get 48 forklift operators, and then I get another 3. And this doesn't seem right, okay? That means probably whenever you have duplicated values in a pivot table that look exactly the same at first glance, you have to think spaces, all right? How would I go about proving that? Well, notice how I selected forklift operator here. I'm going to click right up here on the very last and the very end of the forklift operator phrase. And I'm going to see that that one has no spaces. And then this one, I'm going to click right up here, well out into the end. And notice how it has one big fat glaring space, all right? So that pretty much means that I have extra spaces for all of this. A note that you have to keep in mind, the filters here won't catch those extra spaces, but the pivot table will, and it's going to make your life miserable unless you know how to deal with it. All right, there are several ways to go about it. The first one is manually correcting everything, all right? Just doing a find and replace that you can activate by pressing Ctrl-H on your keyboard and finding the forklift operator with extra spaces and removing those spaces. That's one option. Another option that I'd like to bring to your attention is using text to columns, all right? So I'll go over here to data, and I would select column C and use this text to columns tool. Now, it's not intended for this, but it's really nice that it actually removes spaces, all right? It actually removes spaces. So I'm going to click on fix it with, and I'm just going to go ahead and click finish, all right? Apparently nothing happened, but when I come over here to my pivot table and click refresh, notice how just by doing that apparently useless thing, now I've removed the spaces and I have my 3 3 positions and 37 people that were left blank. Now, if you were in a real job, you'd have to actually call whomever recorded this and ask them person by person what it is that they meant when they left those positions blank. So you'd have to tell them, all right, have a bunch of blank positions. So Flores from Chassis Accessories, that he has no activity. Does that mean that he hasn't been assigned something? He left during training? I don't know. All right. All of these notice are from the exit date. So I am assuming that they weren't giving an activity because they left during training or were not liberated. All right. This is pretty much what I think that they meant. So in order to make it clearer, I'm going to go above and beyond the Call of Duty, and I'm going to type in here activity, exit. All right. That means that these people actually exited the company. All right. I copy paste my exit all the way out to everyone that actually left during training. Come back here to analysis and refresh. Analyze, refresh. There we go. That is bound to impress whomever is interviewing. And I'm going to select everyone. Okay. So what position are the hires in? 51 are forklift operators, 273 are logistical operators, and 72 are in package routing. 37 actually left the company. Okay, so now let's go back to indications. I'm going to start coloring this in yellow whenever I'm finished. What position they're in? How many people were assigned to a plant? And what position? All right, so that means that how many people were actually assigned to the plant. They didn't leave during training or whatever. How do I go about doing this? Well, whenever you have doubts, whenever you actually have to think about what it is that you're doing, you have to, I always tell my students, consider how you would go about doing that if you only had pencil and paper, all right? Pencil and paper, that's it. So how would you go about doing that manually? Well, you have to figure out a way to know who was assigned and who wasn't, all right? Now, that means of all of the people that were given a hiring date, all of these signed a contract, how many were given an assigned date? And to go about, say for example, this one was assigned, and so on, until you get here. Number 26, left during training, all right? So that means that this person wasn't assigned. So I'm kind of figuring out that the way I have to do is either count everyone that has an assignment date and exclude everyone that has this left during training legend. Now, let's check out using the filters to see if I'm missing anyone, all right? I have assignment dates for 2017 and 2014. This one is suspect. Left during training, San Luis Potosí, or blanks, all right? Now, let's check out what's up with the 2014s. This is probably a mistake, all right? This is probably a typo. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume it is, and properly clear that up. If you want it to be thorough in real life, you'd probably have to call up whomever recorded Garcia's entry and ask them if they actually meant this date for the assignment date. All right, there we go. We have no more 2014s. All right, guys. So how would I go about doing that in a pivot table? Pretty simple. How many were assigned and what position? All right. So I'm going to need a similar pivot table to this one. However, I need to filter out everyone that doesn't have an assignment date. So I'm going to insert a pivot table, comes from data range. And I'm going to start out by doing the exact same thing I did up here. Last name to values, activity to rows. All right. However, I need to grab the assignment date and find a way to filter out everyone that doesn't have an actual date, everyone that has something like a legend. So I'm going to go over here and drag it down here to filters. Guys, again, and I cannot stress this enough, think about what it is that you're doing. Figure out that in order to filter out everyone that doesn't have an assignment date by dragging the assignment date to filters sounds really obvious in hindsight. But a lot of my students, I'm talking about usually 20 in a group of 25, they cannot get to that conclusion. And they either start counting by hand or they figure out some really convoluted solutions to this problem. All right, guys? So again, this is where thinking comes in. Make sure that you understand it. And even if it didn't occur to you in the first place, just the simple act of watching me do it is usually enough for you to figure out that that's a possible solution. So I go over here to the assignment date, and I'm going to try and select everyone that doesn't have an assignment date, all right, including the blanks. All right, so I saw 2014 right there, so that means something is wrong. There we go. No more 2014s. All right, so left during training, San Luis Potosí, which I assume means they were assigned to another plant, or blanks, I'm excluding them. And I'm just including anybody that has a date. All right, so that means that of the 433 people, 378 were never assigned successfully. All right, 378 were never assigned successfully, including this little exit guy right here, which supposedly left the company, but he actually managed to get assigned. So I guess we're going to lose that person during the liberations, all right, during the liberation assessment. All right, so the next one, as you might have figured, is how many people were liberated to a plant, what position. All right, so let's insert a pivot table again. No, let's insert a title. Always important to use titles, I tell my students, in order to figure out what your pivot tables are supposed to be about. When you have like 8 pivot tables in a single spreadsheet, it's really hard to figure out what was the original intent, all right? So, how many were liberated? How many were liberated? Let's insert a pivot table, it says data, and I'm going to grab exact same pivot table as before, last name and activity, because they're asking me for the exact same things, but now I'm going to use the liberation date, all right? Liberation date goes to filters, click on right here, and I'm going to filter out anyone that has weird, that doesn't have a date, all right? So the not liberateds, they get filtered out. The blanks, they get filtered out. And that means that only out of 433 people that actually signed a contract, only 238 actually survived training, all right? This is weird, and this is probably a problem with the database, because I have 37 exits, all right? 37 people that probably didn't even get to the assignment, and they were actually never given an activity, all right? So of those that were given an activity, well, a lot of them left the company. All right, guys, so how many were liberated and what position they're in? This is it. Okay, now these two are some horrible, horrible, horrible questions for my students, because it involves the specter of math, all right? My students hate math. I don't know what they're doing studying finance if they don't like numbers, but yeah, whatever. I'm not here to comment on that. However, this is a problem in trying to figure out by position, how long does it take to assign a person, all right? Very few people I've seen in my classes can actually figure that out on their own. Now, what this is asking me is, well, so say, for example, how long in average, I suppose, does it take for a forklift operator to be hired and then assigned, all right? Now, in order to figure that out, I need to add 2 extra columns to my database. The first one is going to be called assignment days. And the second one, I think I sort of glossed over that, is by position how long to liberate a person. So that means how long does it take from hiring to liberation. So I'm going to call this liberation days, all right? So assignment days. This is going to be really simple. It's a very simple subtraction. Just grab the assignment date and subtract from it the hiring date. That's it. All right, guys. The table will do the rest of the operations for you. However, this looks weird. It's a bunch of dates. I don't want that. I want the number of days. So I'm just going to grab the entire column and convert it to values. All right, convert it to values. What do we have here? Number. All right, we've converted it to number. Now, there's something that's glaringly hideous right here, which is called value. All right. And that is going to show up everywhere where someone wasn't assigned. Why? We have hiring date and then we have text. So I'm asking something impossible, which is subtracting a date from text. All right, that's Excel is almost magic, but it's not that kind of magic. All right. So I'm going to show up with a bunch of value problems right up here. All right. I'm going to show up with a bunch of value problems right up here. And this is going to mess up my calculation for my pivot table. All right. So what I need to do is try to work around it. I'm going to end up using an if error, but I don't want to introduce it right now. I just want to go ahead into a pivot table, and I want to show you how it's going to look with my value error right here. All right. So what am I being asked for? By position, how long to assign a person? All right. So copy the format here, insert a new pivot table called data, and my last name is going to go over here to values, my activity down here to rows, because again, I'm being asked for position. And I'm going to refresh this in order to get the assignment days. And I'm going to grab assignment down here to values. All right, it's going to count the assignment days. I'm going to force it to do a sum. And this is where I'm going to start with problems. Get value. All right. Why? Because I am getting, I'm trying to add up this errors. All right. Now I'm going to grab only the people that were successfully assigned. All right. So I'm going to grab the assignment date, drag it down here, and I'm going to tell it to select multiple items, which includes pretty much everything except the dates. Remove everything except the dates. And notice that I totally circumvented my value error right there. All right. Now I get successful assignment days for pretty much every position, including the one guy that was assigned a position and decided to leave the company anyway. All right. However, and this is again another major stumbling block for people. Again, think what it is that you're doing. It says right here, sum of assignment days. All right. So this logistical operator line, it's going to say 1,770. And if you know anything about calendars and dates, that means that's roughly about 5 years. All right. So what does that mean? That it takes 5 years from someone getting hired to someone getting a position? No, that's ridiculous. All right. That probably means that this number is meaningless. Why? Because I am adding up the assignment days of every single logistical operator. That doesn't amount to anything. So what I need to figure out right here is that I need an average. All right. I don't need the sum. I don't need the count. I need an average. Right click on here, go over to summarize values by, and click average. All right, guys. And there we go. We get an answer that makes far more sense. I'm going to convert this to number with just the decimals. And that means that for forklift operators, in average, it takes 11 days to get them assigned. Logistical operators, about 7 days, and package routing, 9 days. All right, this makes far more sense. And the grand total is like 8 days in general for the entire company. All right, guys, now let's grab the count of last name. I really don't need that. Drag it down, drag it out, and there we go. Okay, now we need to do the exact same thing for the liberation. So copy this, paste it right here, by position, how long to liberate a person. And let's go over to database. I'm going to grab the liberation days, create a similar formula to the last one, liberation minus hiring. Now, this is open to interpretation because a lot of people could actually think, and I think it's a valid question, whether it's liberation minus hiring date or liberation minus the assignment date. All right, once assigned, how long does it take to liberate someone? You'll get the numbers. I mean, the numbers will come out to pretty much the same result, but it's up to you and your manager to decide what it is that you actually want to see. All right, so let's see. We still have a bunch of value problems here. We have a bunch of dates that we need to convert to numbers. And there we go. Now, what we're going to be doing is figuring out what it is that we need to filter out right here. All right. Again, same pivot table as usual. Comes from data. We use the liberation days in values. We use the activity in rows. And notice that the count of liberation days is empty. I'm going to need to refresh this in order for it to figure out that it actually has something. There we go. All right, so now we have the count of liberation days, and then we grab liberation date down here to filters. All right, so all of those that were not liberated are excluded, and those that have a blank liberation date are excluded as well. Now we get the count of liberation days. Again, this is a meaningless calculation. It's telling me how many logistical operators actually have a number in their liberation days column. All right. Remember, you have to know how to interpret this data down cold, because otherwise you're going to be getting sort of the correct result, and then you're going to mess it up at the last mile. All right. The last mile being the operation that you need to show. All right. Right click here, show summarize values by average. All right, guys, there we go. Now you'll notice that from hiring to liberation, it takes far more time. Forklift operators take 25 days of liberation. 11 of those are just, well, warming the bench while they wait for a position to be assigned. And then the rest, the other 14 days, would be actually training them. All right, guys? So, this is pretty much what it's telling us. If we had only done the subtraction from liberation minus assignment date, then we would be seeing how long does it take to train someone. All right, guys, how long does it take to train someone? Whether one or the other is correct, it's up to you. All right, it's up to interpretation. Well, with that said and done, we can check off another 2 items. Personal rotation. All right, this one is the clincher. Why? Because personal rotation is something that you probably don't know how to do. If you are not specifically in an HR position, then personal rotation is something that you have to figure out on your own. Now, the formula is really, really simple. It's just equals to the number of exits divided over the number of hires. All right, guys? So there we go. That's the formula for personal rotation. So let's copy the title down here and type in personnel rotation. And guys, a simple pivot table is not going to be enough, but I do need it to figure out the number of exits, the number of total exits. Number of hires, I already have it up here. So insert pivot table, make sure it says data. And how would it go about figuring out the number of exits? Pretty simple. If they have an exit date right here, then that person left the company at some point. All right. So let's grab exit date, drag it down here to values, and I'm going to get a count of exit date. And this is going to tell me 193 people have an exit date. That means that 193 people allegedly left the company. That's it. All right. The actual personal rotation is going to involve dividing this over this. And there we go. 44% personal rotation in this company. Now that's pretty darn high if this was an office environment, but I'm given to understand that in a warehouse environment, which is what this is, it's really, really, really normal. All right. At least in Mexico. I don't know in the United States how it works. All right, guys. Let's go back here to indications. This looks about fine. And finally, we get this really ambiguous and horrible question, which is, how is the population distributed? According to what? All right, with regards to what? What is baseline? How do you mean distributed? So I'm going to assume this is just pretty much a free-for-all, do whatever you want question. I'm going to distribute the population by department. We haven't touched department at all. So I'm going to give personnel distribution by department. Let's copy the format. And I'm going to create a really simple pivot table that I don't care much for. Insert pivot table data, where I'm going to grab how many people are in each department. There we go. Now let's figure out if, since we haven't touched department, let's see if we don't have any mistakes here. No, just 12 blanks, 12 people that never got to a department, or I don't know what it is that happened with them, but the rest, they have a department, and there are no duplicates, no mistakes, no typos. All right, guys, that's it. We already calculated pretty much everything that they expected us to calculate. Now we're going to proceed to the interesting part. We're going to create the dashboard where we're going to show everything here from the analysis. All right, we're going to show everything here from the analysis, and it's going to be all really, really, really pretty. Okay, guys, so let's get started with the presentation. For the dashboard, we're going to aim for something like this. Now, this has absolutely nothing to do with the previous one, except that the design is something that we're going to try and copy. All right, so let's get started. The dashboard is going to be pretty simple because we already did all of the heavy lifting, which was the analysis. So first things first, you can add a new worksheet with this little button over here, or you can press Shift F11 at the same time. It doesn't matter. It adds a new worksheet. All right. So I'm going to call this dashboard. And first things first, I'm going to remove the grid lines because they look horrible in the dashboard setting. Now, guys, the things that we're going to be working with are going to be three main items. It's going to be text boxes and normal boxes and charts and slicers, all right? So, for starters, we're going to have to add a title. That comes from a text box. I'm going to go over here to Insert, Text Box, and notice how we get this little cursor right here? I'm just going to draw a big fat text box over here. So it's going to be called this is going to be called something like hiring analysis. That's it. All right, so this is going to be let's change the font to Franklin Gothic D Mycond. All right, Franklin Gothic D Mycond. Now, I really like this font and it's a personal favorite, but it's not a must-have for you guys. I mean, go ahead and look at all the fonts that Excel offers for you and see if you find something that you like. Now, make sure, one of the basic rules of design is make sure that you don't find something that's really, really stylish. Like, say, for example, this Algerian thing. It just looks tacky. This looks like a design for a coffee shop, so don't do that. So, hiring analysis. And for text boxes, I always tell my students, no fill, no outline. All right, let's marry some colors. I'm going to start using the color yellow. All right, hiring analysis, yellow color. So everything that's going to be done here is going to be either with the color yellow or black or gray. So the first thing that we're being asked for is how many people were hired. All right, so I'm going to insert a shape right here. So insert shape, and I'm going to use that as a card. Now, they were probably not intended to be used as cards, but they serve the exact same purpose. So grab it down here, make it big, and draw some card right here. All right, guys. Now, I always have a lot of students that try to go funny and use smiley faces or hearts or lightning. There's no technical reason stopping you from doing that, but again, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. All right, guys? So I'm going to be daring and use this rounded rectangle. All right, rounded corner rectangle. Now, again, what I always do is white fill. White fill is not the same as no fill. All right, guys? It's two very different things. White fill actually means it's not transparent. Black outline, and for shape effects, I always grab an outer shadow. All right, an outer shadow makes it look like this. All right, so now it looks pretty fancy. And guys, what I'm going to be doing is grabbing the number right out of the pivot table and plopping it down here into my card. Now, one of the benefits here is that the number in the pivot table is dynamic. If my database were to be updated, then my dashboard would be updated. And if I were to add slicers, which we're going to check them out later on, then my dashboard would be updated as well. So in order for that to work, I need to do one thing, all right? This is one intermediate step. I'm going to go back to my analysis, and in the cell that's right next to the pivot table, I'm going to type in equals, and then select this number right here. There we go, guys, 433. All right, guys. So with that said and done, now that we have the number outside of the pivot table, then I am going to go up here and select my rectangle, and in the formula bar, I'm going to type in equals 433. All right, that's it, guys. Okay, now let's add formatting to this. Franklin Gothic D Mycond, make it a little bit larger, and there we go, we have our card. However, we don't know what this card is about, so I'm going to add a text box right up here to serve as a title. So this title is going to be called Number of Hires. All right, Franklin Gothic D Mycond. No, I do not know another font. And drag it up here. Remember, text boxes always go no fill, no outline. There we go, guys. And what should I use here for yellow? Let's do text fill being this kind of yellow. All right. I could also use the new word art scheme, but I really don't like it. It looks really tacky in my opinion. All right, guys. That's it. Number of hires. Okay, with that said and done, let's add more cards to include what position they're in, how many people were assigned to the plant and what position, how many people were liberated to the plant and what position. All right, guys? Now, for this, we're going to have to get inventive with our data visualization skills. Now, nothing that we're going to be doing is high level. As I said, it's all going to be drawing and colors and charts, and all of that is really simple. However, let's make it pop, all right? Let's make sure that whenever the recruiting analyst says this, they say, all right, I want this person on my team. He or she actually know how to use Excel. So I'm going to copy my rectangle from here. I'm going to copy my text box, and I'm going to change it to number of assigned hires. All right, number of assigned hires. Now, for that, I need the total number of assignments. How many were assigned? Notice how I am coming back here and typing in equals and referencing this 378 number, all right? So now I come back here to my dashboard, and for this particular card, I'm going to tell it, go grab the 378 number from here. However, when I tell it to do that, I lose my formatting. It's just the way Excel works. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not designed for design issues. I mean, it's not Photoshop, it's Excel. So what I'm going to do is grab this number from here, copy the format, and click it right here. All right, so there we go. Number of assigned people, number of assigned hires. Let's make sure that the title fits. Let's make sure that this one is a little bit smaller because it's not as important as the total number of hires. And let's make sure, yeah, there we go. All right, guys. Now, notice how I'm glossing over something. How many people were assigned to a plant and in what position? I'm going to fix that later on. Right now, I'm just getting the numbers. So number of assigned hires, and copy and paste that to here to get the number of liberated hires, and copy and paste that to here to get the personal rotation. Okay, number of liberated hires, and repeat the process for the liberations. Get the number out of the pivot table and get the number into the card. There we go, and copy the format from one until the next. There we go, number of liberated hires, and then personnel rotation. All right, guys, so this one right here would be, since the personal rotation number was calculated outside of the pivot table, I can just grab it and go. All right, here we go, personal rotation. Copy the format right into here, make it a little bit smaller, and this has way too many decimal points. There we go. Okay, personal rotation, 44.57%. Now, guys, let's make it pop. We already have this basic structure here. I'm going to add, for starters, the yield of the assigned hires and the liberated hires. What percentage of the total hires were actually assigned and what percentage were actually liberated. In order to do that, I need to add text boxes to my already existing cards, all right? So what I'm going to do here is the following. Make sure that you pay attention. If you're using Excel 2016, you can follow along just fine. I am going to add my text box right here, go back to analysis and calculate the yield. The yield is pretty simple. It's this number divided by the total number of hires. And that is my yield for my assigned people. The yield for my liberated people is this number divided by the total number of hires, and that is the yield for my liberated people. All right, guys? So let's go back over here. Let's go back to my text box and tell it, I want you to bring the data over from the assigned yield. All right, and we have this number just floating up there, 87.30%. We need to give it a name. So check it out. This is where I tell you, if you have Excel 2016, you can follow along. Double click right in front of the 8, and you'll notice that the cursor springs up. And I can just type here, yield versus hires, versus total hires. All right, and that's it. Guys, if you don't have Excel 2016, if you have a previous version, you can't just go ahead and do that. You have to paint another text box and use that for the title. All right, now let's assign some formatting here. Sigoi UE Light, I like it. And format, no fill, no outline. There we go, yield versus total number of hires. I'm going to copy this one right over here and do the yield versus the total number of liberations. I'm going to lose pretty much everything in the process, all right, guys? So there we go. Yield versus total hires. I lost everything in the process, but I can just copy the format painting and do it right here. And for personal rotation, since we already have a percentage amount up there, I'm going to bring up the total amount of people that actually exited the company, all right? And, oh, I absolutely forgot to get it out of the pivot table. So let's reference it outside. There we go, 193. And come back here and reference it here, all right? Total exits. There we go. So guys, we're going above and beyond the Call of Duty with this one because we're doing a bunch of stuff that we weren't asked for, but it adds a lot of value to your dashboard. So always think about what it is that you can add to the dashboard. That doesn't clutter it, but it adds a lot of value. Right now I can see that my assignation process has a yield of 87% and my liberation process has a yield of 54%. I'm losing a ton of people in training. All right, personal rotation. 193 people out of these 143 actually left the company. Now let's get back to my original problem. By position, how long to assign a person? I'm sorry, how many people were assigned to the plant and in what position? All right, how would I go about doing that? Probably the easiest way would be to do some like mini chart that shows us what position they were hired into. All right, so let's do what position the hires are in. I'm going to insert a chart based on this one. All right, now the easiest chart to read for this kind of stuff is, in my opinion, a 2D bar chart. All right, this kind of chart. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is make it easy to read by aligning everything from top to bottom. So data. Select any cell from your pivot table, go over to data and align everything from A to Z. All right, by aligning everything from A to Z, from smallest to largest, in your chart you get everything from Z to A, from largest to smallest. Why it works that way, I have no idea, guys. I just know that it works that way. That's the way Excel functions, all right? I'm going to cut my chart and bring it out here to the dashboard. And let's find a way to shoehorn that in right into here, all right? So for starters, this gray stuff, I need to get rid of it. Right-click the gray stuff and tell it to hide all field buttons on chart. This total goes away. And we need to remove the lines, add the data labels right here, and call it something like hires by position. All right. Now remove as much of the extra data as you can to make sure that you have something that's eminently readable and that provides the information that your people are looking for. All right, now let's go over to a formatting. Whenever it comes to charts, I always make sure that they match the colors that we're using. And we could probably, no, that's too much. We're probably going to get rid of the fill and the outline. All right, and there we go. We have a small micro chart right here that is going to show us the hires by position. If we don't like it, we can just move it down below, which is what we're going to be doing for the other three, the assigned, the liberated, and the personal rotation. All right, guys. In order to do a chart for that, then I'm just going to select my assigned table, go over here to insert, and insert another 2D bar chart, which I first and foremost have to make sure that it is assigned, organized from top to bottom. All right, cut the chart, bring it back here. Bring it back here to the dashboard, and let's make it work. Right-click on the gray stuff, remember, hide all field buttons from chart, remove the totals, remove the lines, remove this stuff from here, and change add the data labels. All right, guys, so the total is going to be assigned hires. Let's make it yellow like everything else in my dashboard. And let's make it no fill, no outline. All right, I'm going to make it small to make sure that you can actually look at it. All right, guys, the same thing goes for the liberated hires. Again, this is pretty much a repeat of what I just did. Select your liberated pivot table, go over to insert, chart, 2D bar chart, cut the chart, bring it back here, and let's see if this works. I'm going to try and copy the format from this chart into this one. And it sort of worked. Now, so the first thing that we have to do is arrange everything from smallest to largest in the pivot table. Hide all field buttons from chart, remove this, remove that, add the data labels, and change everything to liberated hires. Oh, and remove this axis, make it a little bit smaller, and go over to shape fill, no outline. And we want this right here. Okay, there we go. Now we have fulfilled all of the indications right here, all the way up to here. Now, by position, how long did it take to assign a person? There are several things that I could go about adding to that. The first one is using more charts, more bar charts, or the other would be using tables, all right? The other would be using tables. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and copy these tables right up here into the dashboard just to show you how it would look when I added tables. So I'm going to just copy everything shamelessly and paste it right here. And let's make sure that it fits. So let's make sure that it's organized from top to bottom. And when it comes to assigning stuff into a dashboard, I mean copying tables into a dashboard, it's just a matter of making sure that it looks good. Okay, Franklin Gothic dmicon. Row labels would be the position and the average base assignment. I know it says pretty much the same thing, but I think it's more readable that way. All right, now the coup de resistance here, the part that it's actually going to make it work, is going over here to to design, and selecting from here something that matches my color scheme. Anything from the yellow part is fine. I'm going to go ahead and select this one. All right. So I've added this table right here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for by position how long to liberate a person. All right. Let's cut and paste this right here. Make it so it actually sticks. And notice how when I am moving this right here, it's messing up my cards. All right, so it's just a matter of making sure that everything goes back to the way it was. And there we go. This card is also messed up. All right, I'll figure that out later. Now, for this one, we need to organize it this way. And the design is going to be this one and copy. Okay, there we go. So we have two tables in our dashboard, and finally the only thing that we have to do is add personal distribution by department. All right, this one is going to be it lends itself pretty well to a table. All right, I'm sorry, to a chart. So more bar charts. Make sure that it's organized from top to bottom. And I'm going to do pretty much for the nth time the exact same procedure I did for the rest of the charts. All right, so bear with me as I go ahead and add everything that you saw me do last time. Personnel distribution by department. And we're going to do add data labels. That's it. All right, make sure the color matches. Since this is a big chart, I can go ahead and add some big formatting. All right, there we go. Oh, it looks hideous. Well, the contrast isn't ideal. Let's see if we can make it work this way. Whatever. I'll add it anyhow and let the manager strain their eyes trying to understand this. All right, guys. Last but not least, I'm going to add the slicer that nobody asked for, but that I'm going to add anyway. All right, a slicer by department. So in order to add slicers, that's really simple. Go back to your analysis and go back to the very first pivot table that you added, this one. Select the pivot table. Go over here to where it says Analyze and select Insert Slicer. And with the slicer done, I'm going to insert a slicer by department. Where is it? Here we are, slicer by department. Now I'm going to cut the slicer and bring it back here to the dashboard. And there we go. With that done, I have my chassis, well, my slicer, which is sort of going to change stuff, but notice how it's only changing number of hires and the personal rotation. Everything else is staying statically the same. So in order to make the slicer work with everything else, I have to change the connections. Select the slicer, go over here to options, and then select report connections. Once you're down here in report connections, make sure that it connects to everything in your file. All right, every pivot table, every chart, make sure that it is connected. Press OK, and now let's make it a little bit prettier. Not so pretty. Yeah, this one is fine. Okay, and there we go. Now this slicer is going to work wonders. How? If I select chassis accessories, then I only get the data for the chassis accessories department. All right, 78 hires for chassis accessories. 65 were assigned and 38 were liberated. And the personal rotation was 53% in chassis accessories, or say paint, or sitting and dressing, stamping. All right, so guys, this is the really important part of having worked with pivot tables. With pivot tables, you can create this sort of dashboards where you can pretty much add any slicer that you wish, by date, by department, by activity, by whatever, by month, by year, and everything gets filtered out. All right, everything is interactive, and you didn't need you didn't need the help of very complicated formulas. All right. Before slicers existed in Excel, you had to use complicated formulas for this, maybe even Excel Visual Basic macros. But right now that slicers and pivot tables exist, this is all really very low level Excel, all right? It's just pivot tables and just dragging stuff from one place to the next. However, in order to make this presentable, you need to be able to think how it is that you're going to turn all of these 8 action items into something that looks more like this, all right? Guys, last but not least, and I'm not going to bother you with it, is I need to make sure that everything lines up and is properly organized. So, I mean, that's going to take a while, but it's just moving stuff around. So, as pretty much that's how you would go about acing an Excel technical interview. With this, you're going to show off your Excel prowess, and you'll notice it didn't take us more than 40 something minutes to do this as I was explaining it to you. If you were doing this in an actual real environment, shouldn't take you more than 40 minutes, 20 minutes to do this. All right, guys? So with all that's said and done, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like it, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be uploading a ton more videos about individual Excel topics and maybe some coverage of actual case studies like this one. And if you're hungry to learn much more, I have to plug in my online course. Make sure that you check it out. The online course is going to show you everything from Excel from the very beginning all the way out to Visual Basic macros and Power BI. All right, you won't find something more complete in all of the whole internet. I guarantee you that. Not for that price point. All right, guys. See you in the next video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Do you want to be an Excel god? Our online course will turn you into an Excel master in only 90 days. Excel is the most important tool in the office, but almost nobody knows how to use it. Most people dive right into Excel with no formal training and never use the right tools. And thus, they end up delivering messy reports that are full of mistakes, and they end up hating their jobs. In reality, Excel is really simple to use and can do your job for you, if you know how to use it. But you have to pick the right place to learn from, or you'll only end up more confused with all of the different tools and functions that Excel has to offer you. So, what can you do? Our Excel course is tailor-made for you. We're going to teach you Excel, all of Excel, using real-life examples. From simple exercises to full-fledged business case studies. Take the online course and you'll be an Excel god in only 90 days. The course consists in more than 45 lessons and 15 case studies, all with their detailed solutions completely recorded in video, and you're going to be able to access them whenever you want, whatever you want. Best of all, you're going to have lifetime access to the course, and you're going to get any of the updates that we're constantly putting out for free. Even better, when you get our course, you'll have free access to our full Visual Basic and Macros course, and also to our Power BI course, all with just one single purchase. More than 3,000 students have passed through our classrooms. We've attended companies like Kodak, IBM, Cemex, HP, Continental, DB Schenker, and more. So, if you want to absolutely master Excel, make sure that you sign up now. You will become an Excel guy. A2 Excel.